Baseball Australia. It's baseball updates you'll really love. The MLB and ABL news you want. With Paul Morgan and Dan Vaughn. It's baseball's best mate all year round. From the batter's box to the mound.
It's the 4Vision screen there. How about that?
Yeah.
Pretty cool, right? Pretty groovy.
That is.
Very Brady Bunch-ish, if we had.
Yeah, I was about to say that. We're Greg and Marsha here, folks.
Yeah, for you folks on audio, you're like, what are you talking about? We come here on video, and all of a sudden, boom, we've got like 4 pictures, and we look like we're kind of in the old school Brady Bunch. Hello, everybody. Happy New Year.
Just a Happy New Year. Talk about people that can't see it if you listen to audio. The field and the backdrop, is that Sioux City's field?
Yes, I've changed it a couple of times. Let me see if I can. I don't know how I can. Let's do this so you guys can get you folks on video can probably get a look at it like this. Maybe I can't do it that way. Let's do this.
Anyway, that's okay. If you
you can see a little better there. Yeah, on the
podcast, just Google the Sioux City.
And I've used in the background before. I've used Perth. I've used Adelaide, but for some reason that blue and just the way that sky looks and that green, that just the way the colors come off on my screen, I've used it and I've been using it for our show. And I hadn't even thought about changing it, and I probably should have. And I just think it looks good in the background. A little salute to the American Association.
I like it. And those West Coast blue skies.
Yes, they're very, very similar. The only difference in July in Iowa is that the corn is knee high and the waves aren't. That's the only difference. The only difference that we have between the two beautiful Western Australia and Western Iowa. But my name's Dan Vaughn. He's Paul Morgan. We're talking Baseball Australia Live. We're baseball's best mate. Matt, good morning to you. Now, hold on, let me mute myself for a moment.
DV still fighting off the old the Atlanta cough, maybe we'll call it. Maybe the old.
We did scream and holler a lot at the Peach Bowl in Atlanta. It was a great time. The lovely wife's team did not win, unfortunately. The Penn State Nittany Lions did lose to Ole Miss, but we had a great time, and we both came down with various ailments on the way back. She, unfortunately, has had a rough go. She got the old, don't say it too loud.
Spicy cough.
Yes. And then, which you and I swear that back in early 2020, when this thing was just sort of a blip on the radar in China, you and I had it. We swear we had it back in 2000. As a matter of fact, that Canberra game, we were rough,
it was funny. That was during, because obviously the Heat were hosting Canberra this week, and I was just talking about the fact that those two teams have had such a good rivalry over the years, and then I was sort of saying the last time we went there to Canberra was back in January 2020 when. I know you'll remember it as well. We were in bed the entire day. Like, we were still in bed. I think it was a 7:00 game time. We were staying at that hotel over the road there in Narrabundah. And we were still in bed at 6:00 that night. I mean, we'd driven in from Sydney and we were sacked for little nickels, folks. But I hope the doc is feeling better. And
she's much better. I'm much better. I'll be calling a basketball game on Friday, but other than that, I think it's much better. One of those things that happens, it's just part of what we do. Yeah, but that it's funny you mentioned that because I just to pull the curtain back for you folks that are what Paul's talking about. I'd flown in around this time of year and finished out the season. And the first series we broadcast, I think Sydney was playing there in Perth, and we broadcast the game. Yeah. And we both had a little bit of a cough after, but that's not uncommon. You broadcast enough and you talk enough, which we do for a living, you'll get a dry cough from dry. That happens, and your throat gets dry. And I kind of thought of that, your throat was dry after the doubleheader on a Saturday. And then I woke up on Sunday, I didn't sleep real well. And then Monday, boy, it was like a freight train, and you and I were scuffling. I remember we were scuffling as bad as we were scuffling, and we were driving back to were we driving to Sydney from Canberra? I believe we flew to Sydney.
Yeah.
We'd rent a car in Canberra. I mean, at the airport in Sydney. And on the way over, I mean, he and I were like going down the highway, like two, just like It was a.
I remember we
both
stopped
scuffling.
Yeah.
What was the
We
town?
stopped in
This is great stuff.
Yeah. We stopped at, what was that? It was not Yass, it was something like that. But that town we stopped in New South Wales, and we were in that old '60s diner, just sort of beaten down and trying to get ourselves some food before we made it into Canberra.
And we somehow the broadcast was over, and we slept the next day. Of course, Perth lost that heartbreaker 3-2 in that round. Boy, it takes me back. But then we fought it off. We're fine. Anyway. I'm better. Glad you guys are along. A lot of crosstalk there, a little bit too much. Let me go to the headlines quickly. The show planner, but you and I, that just takes me back. That's some memory. I don't think people realize when we say we've done this for a while that there's some things like that have gone on behind the scenes. And I remember and do you remember that story too? Because we were supposed to meet Chris Coleman out like the night before the game, and we couldn't. We were like, dude, there ain't no way we can reach out. We were scuffling. And we met him out the day after the game, I think, or something. But it was just like we weren't trying to big league him. We were really that bad off, and it was just like the stick ward there in Canberra. Anyway, round we're going to round number 3 rounds left, basically, right? 3 rounds.
Round number
12 games each. Everybody's got 12. Yeah, round number 8. Now, we know the magic number is basically, the ABL's done a really good job. Eric's phenomenal piece on a kind of a preview of the league round this week. Really good stuff. Eric's done a great job with that. By the way, big tip of the cap, and thanks for the mention. Shout out he gave us as well with the league. But it's not so much it's not so much the magic number to clinch the top spot, because we won't know that for a while, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. It will be it's Sydney Canberra trying to stave off elimination. That's where the magic number that's out there. But my question is, if you're in Adelaide, you're in Brisbane, you're wherever, you're in Perth, what's the number going to take? What's the final 12-game record going to be to get you a home field game, and perhaps home field throughout the postseason? I mean, is it going to be 10-2, 8-4? What's it going to take? And I think it's going to be, obviously in Melbourne's case, it's going to be a lot higher. They need to go 12-0. But in Perth's case, can Perth go 9-3? We'll talk about that in a moment. And then I got some numbers, and you have some thoughts too on what Tim Kennelly greatness is. I think people just look at the stats and go, well, he's done a lot of great things and played all these games. But I pulled a couple numbers up that I thought were interesting that I don't think people remember his story about, and don't realize that this is a guy that's there's some numbers there. And I'm also got a new segment mixed in the show. It's the numbers by the numbers. It's something I do on my broadcast in Sioux City, where we go through and look at some numbers and then also take you behind those numbers. And that's what's in store for the show. So let's start off. Last week, we always start off with our takes from last week. And Paul, your knee jerks from last week.
Well, I think, one of the big ones was, last week we talked about where the real Melbourne Aces, please stand up. And then their record at home is unreal. That their record on the road is better than their record at home. And I think, Adelaide, again, after having that rocky series against Perth, all of a sudden we move into round 8 DV and we look at Adelaide again and go, okay, well, they are absolutely the team to beat. They should take care of business, I would think, against the Cavs this week. But for me, probably the big takeaway is I felt the Perth-Canberra series probably went the way it was going to go. And then Brisbane-Sydney sort of similar. But, yeah, for Adelaide to go to Melbourne and do what they do and take care of the business the way that they did, to me, just continues for us to show that, we've said it all along, they're champions until they're not. But, they had that rocky series against the Heat, but they're back in business. And last week I was selling them, and I would think I'd be buying them again. But there has to be real concerns around, again, the inconsistencies of Melbourne and Adelaide getting business taken care of and hitting form at the right time.
I would 100% with you as usual. I will take you. My take is there's an old saying that I'm a big Elvis fan, love the King. He had on the side of his plane and the side of his cars, and his thing was TCB, taking care of business, right? That's what they did. The Memphis Mafia, they go out on the road and they just took care of business. They went out and did a great show, and that also included having a little good downtime and relaxing and taking care of business. That's what the King did. TCB, right? Perth did their TC. They did the Elvis. They did what they put on a great show, did what you got to do, took care of business. I was impressed from a Brisbane point of view, where you have those character series, right? Where you got to win them every way. I mean, you got to come back. Your bullpen's got to bail you out. You're off. You win it not just because of the same recipe. For example, a lot of times we talk about, solid starting pitching, short the ball game. Well, Brisbane won it every which way. And I thought it was a very impressive character series for them. That was really my takeaway from the week.
Yeah, it's you're spot on in Brisbane, just peaking at the right time, and big hello to Mama CC as well on the chat. Yes, we were in Adelaide. I remember that trip too. At the old greatness of the Arkabar was another great baseball.
Yes, and I love going there, and heck, we may be there again as well. There's your knee jerks from last week. Quickly to tell you what happened if you didn't catch it last week, but Perth did take care of Canberra in that series at home 3-1. Brisbane 3-1 in those character series. The one that was interesting, and this is going to bring up a quick question I'm going to ask you as well. Coffee there. Melbourne's at home playing Adelaide, a huge series there. They win 4-5 to the Adelaide Giants, as their road record now 11-5, I believe, best in the whole league. Steady as she goes.
For Adelaide, absolutely. I think now, and then they've got to. We look now, and as you said at the top of the show, that everyone's got 12 games to play. Adelaide have, they host Canberra. They have 2 home series in a row. They have Canberra and Sydney at home, which like for a team of Adelaide's quality, I mean, they should really be taking majority of those games. And then finally, they're on the road in Brisbane, and the fact that they're good on the road, and Brisbane's ballpark is obviously an advantage for the Bandits, but it's also a ballpark which is going to play well for big hitting teams, Perth, Adelaide. So, I mean, their run home is, I think, couldn't get any better, especially, back-to-back series against the 2 teams that, look, they'll probably eliminate them both. I would think they'll probably eliminate Canberra this weekend, and then they'll probably go on to eliminate Sydney the weekend after. But I mean, there is no team in the ABL that is in way more than the driver's seat and the box seat than Adelaide at the moment, because the way that they can kind of go about their business now, it's all there. And Alex's point, you look at some guy that obviously Greg Bird's doing his thing, but then for other parts of Melbourne's just not clicking. And it just is the same as last year. It has all the pieces there, it just doesn't seem to click.
Alex, hold on to that thought, because the numbers by the numbers, I'm going to dive into that, because I found, courtesy of a couple of one dear mate of ours is probably watching as well. I'll get to him in a moment. I dug a little deeper in those numbers, and there's some interesting numbers by the numbers that Melbourne really, I did not realize until I went back and went, oh my gosh, and we'll get to that in a moment. But before we go too far here, I have reached out. I do understand by our sources, this is current, that it's already in Major League Baseball's advanced media. The Canberra Perth game will not be made up with the one they owed from back in the ACT. So Perth will play one fewer game. At the moment, it does affect the standings. Perth is a half game off the Brisbane pace. A win over Canberra, would have even them in the standings. There's no plan to make that game up. That game's just going to hang out there in the balance. But Adelaide and Melbourne made their game up. Your thoughts on that? I will go ahead and be the bad guy here. And it's my understanding that Perth wanted to play. Is that what I'm going to just throw it out there. Perth wanted to play.
From what I was led to believe, I think Perth were prepared to play a 5-game series, and then whether Canberra had enough arms, I'm assuming, or not. I'm not sure, but I'm not sure how it all broke down. But from my understanding, I think there was the talk of expanded rosters, etc. But yeah, and look, I understand that there's no doubt there would have been a disadvantage for Canberra to play that fifth game because obviously they don't have if they're not travelling with as many guys. I understand that, but the issue is you now as you look at the standings, you see Brisbane and Perth on the same amount of losses. Brisbane on 17-11, Perth on 16-11. The percentage being 607 for Brisbane, 593 for Perth. So I mean, if those two teams win six, if they both go 6-6, they probably presumably finish, in the 2-3 spot. Let's just say, and then it seems a strange scenario would be in that one team misses out because they couldn't get a game played. So.
Yeah, and I hope from the league standpoint it doesn't happen. I know a couple times this happened. I mentioned this to you over the years in the American Association. There's been a couple times. I believe my last year in Kansas City, that team didn't play but 99 games. There was another team that played.
Yeah.
That does happen in a rare situation, only because the way it happens, because you don't play a team again, and that just the way it goes. But it usually you just hope it doesn't affect things, and that's the whole big thing. That's the scoop. What I understand, reaching out, and that's what my sources tell me. What they told Talking Baseball Australia, which we are Talking Baseball Australia Live, or baseball's best made talking round 8 right here. Matt out there as well. Let's move on.
Oh, tell you what, Cambo, this is Compitchen flying the outfield. That was one of the highlight reels.
Yes.
Michael Campbell out in the right field just launched himself over that chain link fence, but it was some commitment plus.
The famous chain link fence, the fence by fence.
Yeah.
And there's no tarp out there either.
No, but they must have heard us in the last show though, because that was actually the funny thing. That was one of the knee jerks of the weekend as well. I came to the field on whatever day it was, Thursday, and they'd moved that tarp from the outside onto the field. So I thought, someone must have tuned in and gone, hang on, wait a minute.
We went through a whole thing about this last week. It was one of our Call the Pins about the tarp situation.
Yeah.
And it's a story. I've told this story at least 10 times there in the States. And yes, they probably did hear us say, hey, wait, we should probably at least put the tarp visually in play, because for a number of years, it sat behind the fence. And to get over the fence, you need a forklift or something. But by the way, one more note on that whole, here's the deal. Let me just throw this out there. Let's just say this half-game swing does give Brisbane the home field, right? In a league where the margin of financial success is very thin, where, and I can just tell you from a personal standpoint, you were there last year. Perth hosting one game against Adelaide was a huge windfall in the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was it?
Absolutely.
It was 5,000. That was their best crowd, best financial windfall for one game. It's not just what's going on the field. It's also the opportunity for one of those franchises to have a home game or two, or whatever the case may be, 3, and perhaps in a year. Again, the Australian Baseball League is not a windfall. It's not a casino collecting. That's not what it is. Even on your best years, breaking even's your goal. There's no huge TV deal. There's no big media deal. So getting to even is a huge goal. And part of getting to even is having home dates with folks in the seats. And I'll be honest with you, and I won't go into this right now, but Perth, I believe, is averaging 790 per game. They're down like 400 from last year. So that would give them a huge advantage to get some home games and help their gate out and their bottom line. And the same for Brisbane, right? It works both ways. So I just put out there here on Talking Baseball Australia Live, baseball's best mate. Cough button real quick. Hold on.
Yeah, and I think you're spot on, DV. And then you looked at the crowd again on Saturday night, back into those 1800s, and you're spot on. I mean, even something as small as even how, like probably on Thursday night, and I know we're talking a bit too much Perth at the moment, but Thursday night there was probably the worst weather I've ever experienced at the ballpark. There was this cyclonic almost wind blowing in, and it was chilly, it was gross, but the merchandise tent sold that many hoodies that they actually had a little financial windfall from selling hoodies. So it's, you've got to get the people there, and if you don't get them there, you're not getting. There's only so many ways you can make money in this league, and merchandise, tickets, adult beverages are pretty much it. So
this may move something on the end of the show off the ledger until next week, but I want to just take you guys to a minor league story that you brought up. You talk about the hoodies. I was baffled by the fact that my first job in baseball in Charleston, West Virginia, the owner of the team, who now runs the Prospect League, had these cases of the little, and you've seen in the little rolled up ponchos. They're a little cheap. They cost like a couple of bucks.
Yeah.
Get cases of them. And I thought, what the hell do you need those for? You're going to be, well, because the nights where it did get crappy weather and it rained, you'd sell a little $5 poncho. People bought the crap out of those things, and you made a little something, even if they're waiting for a rain delay. I didn't think it in those terms, right? As a college kid coming out of university, I'm thinking, well, you don't need. The guy was genius about things like that, and that's an opportunity knocking right there. So anyway, as we shift.
Absolutely.
All righty, it's that time of year as we kind of get back on track here on Talking Baseball Australia Live. You and I believe this firmly. I know that our dear mate Lachlan Dale in Perth would tell us the same thing. I know that Justin Huber probably said the same thing in Melbourne. It's these moves that happen now that are huge. And there are a few of them coming out. First off, one guy that joined a couple of weeks ago, probably a little too late, but Justin Wiley, huge impact there in Sydney.
You would know him from the American Association, of course. You would have seen him pitch a few times there, and I think what's interesting, and you always hit the nail on the head. You see these guys at the association level, and obviously the ABL has a partnership with the American Association, but you would have seen him pitch multiple times throughout the year, and I think of anyone, you've got the best radar to kind of watch a guy and go, that guy may not get picked up by a big league team, but I bet you that guy would dominate it. That will go extremely well at the ABL level. I mean, I think that's one thing you've always, the benefit of being able to have a foot in each camp.
And that's for Brisbane. I think this weekend's a guy to watch is Connor Panas, who's a 30-year-old journeyman, but he's a guy can hit. He's a guy that in a close series, a guy like that can be a huge difference maker because you're looking at probably a couple of teams that you're going to have some long balls hit in that ballpark.
Yep.
But that one extra bat, is he that one extra piece of lumber that'll be huge for them, much like with the Heat getting Jordan Martinson or Marshall Schill or Shiota. Can those guys be difference makers? A couple of their names. Solomon McGuire's back as well for Sydney. Good to see him back. He's a kid that we think's got a pretty bright future as well. Mitch Ellis and Gerald Belbin for Melbourne. And then Scott McKeon, another guy, AAA guy along with Cam Warner and Canberra. AAA guy for the Cubs, probably too little too late, along with Justin Wiley with Sydney. But you're getting some guys, late additions of that group of folks. What are your thoughts on that group of perhaps really being helpful? I mean, Adelaide just seems so deep, but everybody else needs a little help.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I think realistically at this point in time, you could. I talked about it on the broadcast last Friday. I mean, realistically, Canberra to get through are going to have to go 20-20. To get to 20 or to get to 20 wins, they're basically going to have to win the next 12. They're going to have to go 20-19 to get in. So they can't afford to lose the game, in my opinion. I think if they drop one game, they'll get eliminated, in my opinion. But Sydney still have a puncher's chance. I'm not suggesting that it's a very good puncher's chance because their three are Melbourne, Adelaide, and Perth. I mean, they got probably the hardest run home of anyone. But yeah, look, I think in adding these guys, I think that there's a couple of guys as well. I actually think probably the one that has of all of them, all of the guys getting added this week, I actually think the one that's probably and actually Alex is the male on the new Perth. I would think it's going to. Jordan Martinson's been signed to the Heat, so Jordan Martinson. So the interesting part about this, as well, if everyone doesn't fully, I mean, I'm sure most people know, but to qualify to play the postseason, you have to be in three. You have to be in 3 rounds of the season. So there has to be 3 rounds of the season. So you've only got 8, 9, 10. So if you don't make the roster this week as a new player, there's no point you being on the roster because you can't play the postseason then. So I would imagine you got Yuichi Shioto, who was a Japanese pitcher who pitched for the Heat last week. He's coming back in, and also Jordan Martinson's coming in as well as a guy, Marshall Shrill, who I don't know too much about, but I think he played a little bit of time in the association. But
Frontier League, I believe he was in. I had looked him up, and
he played a little time. I saw the connection where he played with Brock Gilliam, of course, last season. Yes. Somewhere in the front, somewhere I'd never heard of, to be honest with you, in the Frontier League,
the Pioneer League, I believe.
Yeah.
Pioneer League, which is the newer independent league. But Schill is he is out of St. Charles, Missouri. Actually went to Linwood University in St. Charles. He's from Arizona, Ogden, but he's pitched the Frontier League, Quebec.
Ogden, that was it. Yeah.
He's been a mostly reliever. And what I like about this, and this is just sort of what we got to remember about these moves. For example, Connor Parnasse with Brisbane, he's a good stick. He's a good outfielder, good team guy. He can just provide you some depth, right? Doesn't mean he's going to start right away and the 4-hole drive, but he's getting you depth. Sometimes you move the deck chairs around. Obviously, the Heat missing a starter. That starter may become from that bullpen, but if you strengthen the bullpen, you don't want to rob from Peter to pay Paul, so you're obviously going to take the bullpen, and Martinson goes in there, and Schill goes in there. Shioda comes in the rotation in some form or fashion. You've strengthened your bullpen, and you got yourself a starter. That's the key, really, as far as his numbers. And I didn't pull this out earlier, but he's been predominantly a reliever. He's in 4 seasons. He's relieved 132 ball games, no starts. So this is a guy, reliever. Did we lose? Oh, there we go. I thought I lost me there for a second. Reliever right there. But just looking at the additions here, I think we talked about this last week. We thought Perth had to make a move of some sort. We didn't know what it would be. And here's the thing. You've got a situation where these guys are playing in Mexico or Venezuela, and a lot of times their teams get eliminated for the Caribbean World Series. Now, how that works is a long story. I won't get into it, but every team playing in the Pacific League in Mexico is up for possibly being a part of the Caribbean World Series. Whoever wins the league will play in that World Series against Puerto Rico, Venezuela, Colombia, Dominican Republic. If your team doesn't make it, you're done. Now, that's what happens. There's not a lot of places to play in the world winter ball that are still going on. Australia is one of them. Now, a guy has to ask himself, do I want to make that long flight? What's the financial implications? Is it going to be financially worthy for me? Because I'm going to pitch and put miles on my arm. I'm going to make money doing it because I got to sort of pay the bills too. So a lot of things go into what you get this time of year. Organizations won't send. The Yankees aren't going to send you 4 prospects in January. Ain't happen. The Rays have been shut down their players already. Most of these guys are getting shut down. So dynamics of getting players have got to really be in the weeds. And that way, over the years, Melbourne and Perth have done really good jobs of deep in finding guys that can navigate the waters that are out there right now. Because getting players, you just go call a guy up January 1st, hey, come on over. It's not that easy. And a lot of times guys, and if guys have pitched in Mexico, Dylan Unsworth, for example, somebody asked about Unsworth earlier.
Yep.
He might want to have a little time off, right? If he's got a spring training invite or he's signed to get to play in Mexico in May, he wants some time off. You can't pitch 12 months a year. So there's a lot of going into it. I will tell you this, Jordan Martinson will be a big benefit there. He's a hard-throwing lefty, but I think the two biggest things is going to be watching the kid Connor Parnasse and also what those pitchers do.
And the other thing,
big additions for me.
Connor Parnasse as well. He was, I think he's the first one we've seen I know a couple of guys got signed, but Connor Panas was part of that Baseball United in Dubai, which is that showcase. So he played on, I think, one of the United teams, the same team as Didi Gregorius. Who else was in his team? Robinson Cano was in his team and whatnot. Which they played that. They played that show. I don't really know what's quite. We'll have to dig in as we kind of go more global in our coverage. We'll have to dig into what's happening more in Dubai. He's signed for the Dubai Wolves, Connor Panas. But yeah, I'm with you, DV. I think he's a guy. And imagine him this weekend as well. Like, you wouldn't imagine he'll do much tonight, kind of fresh off the plane. But if that late in that series, he comes off the bench as a pinch hitter in that smaller, that hitter-friendly ballpark. I mean, you're right though. He's the guy that, for me, is probably the signing that could be the difference between them getting home field and not. I think that's one guy. So
we will get that in a moment here on Talking Baseball Australia Live. Baseball's best mate, Dan Vaughn, Paul Morgan with you worldwide here, and glad you're tuning in. A couple of numbers on the numbers quickly before we get to the predictions and the preview of this week. A little segment I do on the broadcast every night on our radio broadcast in Sioux City. And I'll go over the numbers on the numbers. I go behind, the numbers we don't talk about a lot, like, runners in scoring position, or winning in white jerseys as opposed to black jerseys, or, Tuesday night record, things, just crazy numbers that don't always make sense. This is some wild numbers here. Now, Adelaide has a huge leg up with a record on the road of 11-5. Melbourne's 10-6 on the road. But the Aces are 4-8 at home, and they're 14-14 overall. If Melbourne can play anything at home, so I dove a little deeper. Now, Stuart Capel tipped me off of this, so Stuart, tip of the cap to you, my friend, there in Victoria. Here's one of the problems the Aces have had this year. It's a little thing, but it's a big thing. And take yourself to a casino. You win that first blackjack hand, you're playing on house money, right? You win that first game of the series, you're playing on house money. You drop that first game, you got to scramble to get even and scramble the doubleheader. Winning the first game of the series in the Australian Baseball League is huge. They're 1-6 in series openers, and the only one they've won was on the road at Sydney. Their home ballpark in their first game.
I think I might have lost DV. Looks like. Let's see if we can get DV back. But the numbers are interesting, though. And I think the only thing I'll add while we're waiting for DV to jump back on, if you look at the Melbourne Aces players home and away, their splits, the only one that's hitting better at home than away is Robbie Glendenning. We've talked about how important Glendenning is for the entire journey and for the Aces moving forward. And there's guys that when you look at their numbers, what they're doing at home, and this is a fair, so away, for example, you've got guys like Greg Bird's hitting 294, Khalil's hitting 364, Dale from 12 games hitting 366. Then if you take them back to home, the Melbourne Aces, the only ones really at home, but like Mitch Edwards has only played 4 games at home, but Robbie Glendenning's the only one hitting 300. You go back to look at those guys, Jared Dale at 259, Greg Bird at 250. So there's a major difference there, but I think we might have DV back now.
Sorry, I did there. I don't know where did I leave you? Where did I leave you right there? When I say
you were just you were digging into. So you've told us about so basically in the midst of talking about the hitting woes of Melbourne after dropping the opening series opener.
I'll brainstorm again real fast here. Okay, Aces are 1-6 in game ones of series. Now they're 7-1 against Sydney and Canberra, 7-13 against the other 3. Adelaide's been a monster at the plate at home, 279. I'm sure he's that on the road at 279, only hitting 225 at home. A little further, what is the difference between those two numbers? Is that Adelaide had a chance to drive in runners when ducks are on the pond, 302 with runners in scoring position. Amazing number to me. And that's some number. One more number for you Perth faithful, because I'll give you one to kind of throw out there as well. you go. The Heat are not hitting well in position in general. Okay, they're down, I believe, 217.
Yeah.
Okay, 7th, 8th, and 9th inning onward in games that are close, meaning they're either leading or down by a run or even. This is impressive. For behind the numbers, they're hitting a league-leading 282 with a 7 on-base percentage, meaning either tie game, 1-run lead, tie run on deck. The Heat are hitting 282. So while they're collecting body of work, what's so funny is sometimes you look at these numbers and go, well, gosh, why is Adelaide so great in the road? Well, why is their number so good? It's because the scoring position number is so good. Well, why are the Heat hanging in there where their offense seems to be scoring position? Because when it matters most, 7th, 8th, and 9th, they're doing it. Why are they trouble in series? Because they got a great record on the road. 500 is good in the road, but their home record suffers. Why? Because they're having a hard start. You got to sometimes take these baseball stats, which we love baseball stats, and take one layer of the onion and go, oh, wait, there's something there. And so that's my little numbers by the numbers.
Well, next week we'll get the numbers by the numbers brought to you by T-Mobile or someone with the speedy fast internet for the US. We'll have to get a sponsor over there, so we'll have to find
we'll find us
a lightning quick non-buffer internet.
Alfred Harold says stop overpricing the food outlets and bringing in cashless kiosks. Harold, we'll dive into some of that in our end of season show.
There was actually, there was. I don't know whether you saw it, and I said to on ABL Fans again with Stuart Capel, he had a great question, great post, great conversation around the declining crowds in the ABL, and there was a couple of thought starters up there. Harold's sort of thought around the overpricing food and stuff is that, and I said on the comment, I said, I think when this season's probably done, it would be great to get a couple of people a couple of people join us in the show, a couple of people from around the country, maybe some, other fans or broadcasters around the country, and have a round table and just have an open forum here where we can talk about, how we collectively grow the game and what's preventing bums on seats and what's stopping the growth. And I think, if we get a few minds together to have a really good open and have people able to chat in, we might be able to sort of maybe we'll be able to nut down a thing or two about a thing or two. But I think to Harold's point, and Harold obviously is in Perth, so and there's no doubt that the concessions have changed. Like there's you may go back. I mean, my fondest time was when back the state teams used to be like at Bunnings. The state teams used to do a sausage sizzle every week. You $2, you get your hot dog or whatever it is, and they'd pay for that for the 16s and 18s. But we'll get Matt and Alex and everyone else along, and we'll just have a bit of a round table. It'd be good to get perspectives from like we can cover the West and people in Adelaide and Brisbane and whatnot, and just sort of see if we can, as a collective, we can kind of put forward some suggestions and see if we can all help the game grow.
Tell me in by then. I'll have a great streaming setup by then here on Talking Baseball Australia. Live baseball. I've been shopping for a new laptop, by the way, folks, for like since Thanksgiving here in the States. But I'm Talking Baseball Australia Live. Dan Von Paul working with you. Glad you're along. 8 is upon us. I'm gonna, and this is by no means. I hate when I mention this because it sounds like I'm kind of poo-pooing the other series, but. Canberra and Adelaide, I'm just going to say it with one letter. Because I love the Cavs and I love their home fans and I love what they do. And I love I've never disliked them at all. I don't have any, even back in the day when that year they won the Shield and it was a disappointment. It was my first year. And it's last chance highway for them. And this highway has only got it's the old Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner. And the next thing is signs up and that's it.
Yeah, I think they've. I mean, I'm with you. I'm actually a massive Cavs fan, and we've talked about it on the broadcast and many times, and we've been fortunate enough to go to Canberra on multiple occasions, and the fans are great, the people are great in Canberra. And I still say this: one of the best places to go and watch a game of baseball, if you can. In Australia, it's just a great atmosphere. But yeah, look, I think they can't lose. I think if they lose one game, they're done, in my opinion. I just can't see how they get out of that. And look, they've got some pieces, and look, they're not. They had some good players, and they've got. I think their pitching's a little thin, and I think their numbers suggest their pitching's a little thin, and it gets a little thin pretty quickly. And I think, look, I can't see them. Like Adelaide. I think Adelaide know right now. I mean, if you're Chris Adamson or you'd be sitting those players down now going, look, this weekend is a huge chance for us. We can go from 18-10 to 22-10. We know Perth and Brisbane are playing each other, and if you're Adamson, you might go, let's assume those two teams are going to split. With 2 rounds to go, we got back-to-back home series against. Don't forget, Adelaide have back-to-back home series against who have they got? They got Canberra and then Sydney. So they got the 2 teams that they would, without a doubt, be sitting there going, like, we can win 8 games. We could win 8 games in a row. We can take care of business. We can put the Q in the rack on that last series. We know we'll be the number 1 seed, and we can go from there. So. Yeah, it's an interesting series, and to Phil's point as well, and we talked the numbers behind the numbers. And again, I'm watching the Cavs this week. The Cavs aren't that. They're not a. I don't think they're what their record suggests.
No,
they're just a couple of arms shy, but they've got some, and they maybe a battle so shy of being up the top. But
yeah, I believe I saw what Eric wrote with the league too. That Eric Balnart, I think they hit 279 in December, which I think led the league. But again, that's December. It's the body of work, and there's 6 and he's right, 5 and 6 since then. But
what I will say,
go ahead.
Yeah, what I will say about Canberra, which was one of the most impressive things I found about them in the series. The Thursday night game, I will go on the record saying I thought was the worst game the Heat have ever played in the history of me ever watching the Heat. But outside of Tyler Beardsley, who had an outstanding start, that game was just awful. But the wind was blowing in hard. I mean, it was blowing in and we said it on the broadcast. I don't think you could have got Juan Soto, Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, anyone. I think anyone could have been at the plate. No one on planet Earth had a chance of hitting a home run. But what the Cavs did, they won that game 8-0. There was a lot of wheels off, errors and things like that. But they played the conditions so well. You had the Heat going up to the plate, swinging for the fences every time. Now, the ball was, any well-hit ball was getting caught up and caught in shallow outfield.
The doctor.
But the Cavs made it, and it was insanely windy. It's never been that windy before. But the Cavs adjusted to the conditions far better than the Heat did, and ended up winning the ball game 8-0. But that was the one thing I thought was so impressive about Canberra, was just their ability to go, hey, plan A is out the window. Like, we need to go to, and they had a lot of guys that could do this. So look, do I think they'll sweep Adelaide? No. But look, could they give Adelaide a scare? Sure. I think they are a team that is capable of doing that. But
you're hoping, if you're Brisbane, Perth, and even Melbourne to a certain degree, you're hoping that series is a split. And as a fan, you're hoping to goodness there's a split. A sweep for Adelaide, like you said earlier, puts that thing on. Really puts things. It's not put this way. It all depends what happens everywhere else. I mean, if you're Brisbane, you sweep and Adelaide sweeps, or Adelaide sweeps and Perth sweeps. Well, you've held course. You're right. You've held serve, right? So that's part of it. But I just look at it from a practical standpoint. Adelaide's they're not great at home, but that's not the point. Their body of work. And again, when you're hitting 300 with runners in scoring position, I don't care if you're hitting 212 or 225 at the plate on the surface of the moon, but when you've got runners on base, you hit 300, you're playing out in the car park, you're going to win series, and you're going to win a lot of them. I just don't think there's any way. And
Yeah.
as scrappy as Canberra is, and is some of those fun players they've got, and a lot of players I love. I mean, there's some names. I mean, Phil throws some names out there you got to like. I just think this is. If I'm Adelaide, and I think you're right. This is our rounding into form. We're getting it. We're getting the ship. We're getting the battleship headed in the right direction, and we're going to go full steam ahead. And you guys going to join us? Well, you better get going. That's what kind of why I think it's going to be. I think Adelaide wins that one 3-1. I do think Canberra gets a series win, a game win somewhere, but I'm going to go 3-1 Adelaide.
Yeah, I'm going to. I think if Canberra get a win, I think they'll get a win tonight. I think they were good on Thursday night against the Heat. I thought their lineup was good. And to Phil's point, like the guys like Corey Acton and Junpei Azuma and and their whole entire outfield was they all made highlight plays in the outfield. Moritz and Azuma, and of course Campbell took that. He's not playing this week, but he took that fly over the field. Robbie Perkins behind the dish is outstanding. I will say this, and it's interesting because I think Canberra have the same. Canberra when Robbie Perkins sort of catches 2 games, then they swap in with an affiliated catcher as well, similar to what Perth does. There's a massive difference, in my opinion, for both teams. There's a big difference when Perkins is calling the game, and I think also when Hall's calling the game as well. So it's, albeit Hall, it's called that. And there's behind the dish for the 8-0, but.
And there's a little bit of that because then that's as expected because guys in affiliated ball are taught a certain way from each organization from the top down how they want the games called, how to handle pitchers. Some guys are better at it than others, but in general, there is an organizational philosophy, and each one's a little different. But that's not uncommon. You're right on though. That I've noticed that same thing too, and you notice it a lot in indie ball when a guy comes in from say the Cardinals organization, where he's caught a certain way, or the Braves organization where they've handled pitchers a certain way. I'll tell you a guy who you could clearly tell was calling a different game was when Matty Kennelly would call a game, or Alan D. San Miguel would call a game. Those are guys that spent time with a inflated ball. You knew they were calling a different game than, say, the young kid that was just making his first start across the way. That's not uncommon, and I think you're right on it. I noticed that too, and a really good point. Really good stuff right there. Talking Baseball Australia Live, baseball's best mate, Dan Wide, Paul Morgan with you. Predictions as we roll along here. And Sydney and Melbourne, I always say, these two teams can play anything. These two cities can play, dice, cards. I don't know. You name the game you want to play. Dodgeball.
Yeah.
It gets pretty. The fans get a little frosty about it. This one's going to be there in Melbourne. They've had good crowds, great atmosphere. Our friend Michael Dixon, dear mate of mine. I know he's loving his time in Victoria, great city. Then Melbourne, they do a phenomenal job. It is a machine there, what they're doing. But this one you mentioned earlier, it's right now 4 wins. The Aces if the Aces sweep, they can sweep their way to the postseason, and the Aces can basically eliminate Sydney with 4 wins. Or Sydney's opportunity is win a series, win 4 games, get your tail right back in it. It's a pretty big situation on the field.
Yeah, and I think I would probably comfortably normally say Melbourne should go pretty well here, but their inconsistencies at home and their poor record at home makes you wonder, is this a series that maybe Sydney can pinch and just stay in contention? And if they can pinch at 3-1, like all of a sudden, they're not far. They're only 2 games behind. They'll only be a couple games behind. But if they'll go 13-19, the Aces would go in that case 15-17. So they're in it. So I mean, I think the big difference between Sydney and Canberra is I think Canberra are coming from a mile behind. I think they're in such a tricky place. But a series win for Sydney, and they're right back in this thing. I mean, and then for Sydney, their run home as well. I'll talk you through the run homes as well. So Melbourne have obviously Sydney this week. Then they have to come here to Perth, and they have Canberra to finish off. Sydney have obviously they're on the road back to back, which is going to be tricky. And they have got a really tricky run home. They've got obviously Melbourne away, then they've got Adelaide away, and then they've got Perth at home to finish off, which could be So they've got to. So this is I think for Sydney, this is a must-win or Q goes in the rack series. I think if they drop this series, I think you then look at the final two. You got to go on the road to Adelaide, and like hosting Perth is whatever. But it's just it's you talked about Elvis before, DV. You're queuing up there. It's now or never, because it's
Right.
absolutely it's now or never
It's now or
for the
never.
Aces. Good. So,
Yeah.
it's
I'm with you. And Matt said he had Tony Harris on his show. By the way, congratulations on your show, mate. That's what the postseason. Yeah, they've got the two road series, the one series against Perth. The opportunity's there. Now they're 4 games back with the 12 to play. I don't have the head-to-head did. Well, I can tell you right now because Melbourne was 7. When I told you 7-1, they were against. That was what my notes told me here. I think that's what I said.
I think Melbourne swept that series in Sydney, didn't they? From memory.
I believe you are correct on that. Let me see here. Quickly checking my cheat sheet here. Aces are 7-1. They were 7-1 versus Canberra and Sydney. So they do what they got to do. They'll be fine. But you're 4 back before to play. I'm going to tell you that. Go back to a guy I mentioned earlier. And also as a guy, Jacob Robson, that's also in the card, a teammate in Kansas City. Jacob Robson, remember Team Canada, is playing for Sydney. Love him as a player, former big league.
Detroit Tiger.
Yep, Tigers.
Yep.
Now, this Justin Wiley, who was played in Kansas City, hit 300 for Kansas City this year, was their leadoff man for the most part this year on a championship team in the American Association as they won the Miles Wolf Cup. He's starting to really be something special. Now, is it too little too late? I think he's a huge difference maker this weekend, easily between, and this could be one of those shows with Bird doing what Bird does and Wiley doing what Wiley does. Yep. And Phil says if you eliminate the 4-0 sweep of the Blue Sox, and Sydney had the same record, 10-14. And that's where I'm going, Phil. And Phil, by the way, does a phenomenal job with those Giants. I really believe that sometimes, and you've seen this before as well, the pieces sort of come together and it's the last possible moment, but they're coming together. And I do believe that Sydney's got a great chance to win 3 this weekend. I'm going to go on the safe side and say they split the series, stay very much alive, but actually, screw that. Give me Sydney taking 3 or 4 this weekend against Melbourne. I know it's crazy. People in Victoria are going to hate my guts, and they usually love me. I'm going the direction. I think this – I just have a feeling with Wiley and Robson, and I'm just throwing it out there. And also, I mentioned earlier, I don't know what Solomon McGuire's got to offer this weekend, or Todd Gradden, but they got something to offer. And I just have a feeling that when it's all said and done, the worm's going to turn. Sydney's not played them well. Melbourne has. But I just think give me Sydney 3 or 4. And
I actually I don't think you're crazy. I think that's a series that Sydney can go in and win. I don't know. Sometimes I think going on the road as well can be a good thing for some teams. And the other thing I think is that's a great ballpark there, Melbourne Ballpark. I mean, it's just sort of, it's a really, we talk about we talk about these minor league experience ballparks. They've got a great little corporate area behind. They've got, it's a great ballpark to go and play some baseball. And look, guys like Jacob Robson, as you said, look, they're going in against a team with 4 former big leaguers in their team in the Aces, and they're going to get the competitive juices flying as well. And I don't think Gosgi's back for Sydney this week, but look, I think that I thought they're a pretty good team. Melbourne, I don't know what their offensive struggles I don't know why they're struggling at home so much. But we'll have to kind of get to the bottom of that. But I don't know. I just feel every time the opportunity the Aces have of becoming the real Aces, it seems to be. It seems to not happen. Having said that, I think that I'll give the Aces the benefit of the doubt and say that they'll kind of, because they sort of have that FIFO schedule a little late. They're kind of week on, week off, and they were a week off last week. So I'll give them the fact that I think they'll be on this week and win that series 3-1. But
it'll be rocking. It'll be rocking for sure.
Yeah,
it'll be rocking for sure. Final, the one that probably has a lot of implications as far as where the ABL playoff format works. By the way, here I'm Talking Baseball Australia Live. Glad you're along. Dan Vaughn and Paul Morgan with you. Top 4 teams go on. You got a 1, 2, 3, 4 seed. Your 1 seed, your 2 seed, they host the first round series, and then your winners of those series, the higher seeded team will host 2, and the other one will host 1, which is what we talked about earlier. Just a bit later, going to see Tonks out there as well.
Yes.
So getting at least 1 round at home is huge, and for both these ball clubs, for different reasons. Brisbane's home field's has been big over the years. I mean, they've been as tough. It was a great piece, as I mentioned earlier. The league did. Eric, I think it was Eric's piece, talked about that as well. Again, just great work from Eric and company, Phil as well. Yeah. But they've been great at home over the years, and Perth's the only team really took care of them last year. Perth's been tough at home. It's a long trip. We talked about the long trip going west. It's a big series. I love this spot for the Heat only because, again, they only got to split the series to my math. They split the series. Is that correct? Because they did win the series before. They're up 3-1.
They won. So Heat won the series 3-1. So they just need to split to get the tiebreaker.
Split the tie. So a split here would give them the tiebreaker, meaning if they did sort, which is going to be hard to finish even because of the half game there, but still, should the half game not come into play, if there is a head-to-head, you win that head-to-head, which is huge. And I think from a Heat standpoint, we talked about playing on house money earlier with Melbourne, winning an opening series at home. This is the situation. By winning your series at home, the pressure is a little bit off you, but I love this spot for the Heat. I think TK's got a great chance to at least 1 in this ballpark. I think it'll be an entertaining series. I would imagine runs will be aplenty, and I have a feeling Alex Hall will have one of those Alex Hall series that will put him right back up there he's in the mix now, but he's not alone there. But I think Alex Hall is probably 3rd right now in the Helms Award, and probably gets him back in the 1-2 spot again.
And we talk Alex's from a Brisbane standpoint. Alex Skepton, I mean, the rookie who has probably in the 1 seed for the Helms.
He's the 1 spot right now.
And what a phenomenal season he's had. And look, he could be the guy that. And this, honestly, this is a series that I actually don't know what's going to happen in this series, because I think when these 2 teams played last time, you can make an argument that both teams could have swept each other. You can make an argument could have been split. Like either that, every possible scenario could happen between these 2 teams last time. I think that's the case again this time. What's going to happen in this one? No idea. But look, I think Brisbane probably for mine. I think that home field advantage, and you talked about it earlier, and those numbers that again, shout out to Eric for putting these together. 25-7 in the last 2 seasons at home. I mean, remember there was a time that they were unstoppable. Now the difference is perhaps you put a TJ Bennett in that lineup and things like that, Donald Lutz, and their long ball's not as much of a friend as it was. That ballpark does, and we've talked about it before. That ballpark I think still continues to be like a place that if you're like a team like the Heat, you're probably going, we can't wait to play in that ballpark, because boy, there has been a lot of, I don't know what the exact percentage is, but I could find it out, but I'm not on the fly. There has been unbelievable amounts of times the Heat have been, caught on the track at home this season, which caught on the track at home this season is gone in Brisbane. So, so I don't know. It's I think to Alex's point, you probably call a split in this one, because who would know? I don't think there's anything but you can sort of call a split, because I don't. If we're sitting here next week and Brisbane swept or Perth swept or won the series, nothing would surprise me at all, because I don't think there's anything between these 2 teams now. part of me thinks that both teams will break out in certain games. I think there'll be probably big innings and crooked number innings across the board. But yeah, I think the most likely scenario and the most boring scenario will be a split. But I think that
I'm with you.
I don't know how you really kind of make an argument either way.
A slightly better pitching numbers for the Heat, just about a half run lower. The walks, 10 more walks, but they've also pitched a little bit. They've pitched 30 more innings as I'm looking. Oh, those are home game. I'm sorry. Looking at the wrong ones there. Pardon me.
And I don't know, like when we look at the guys coming in, Marshall Schill, Yuichi Shioda, and Jordan Martinson as well, I don't know how prepared, stretched out, whatever you want to say, they are. So I don't know how much work they're going to be able to give you in this series either. Are they going to be able to give you more than an inning? Are they only going to give you an inning, or what's going to happen? And
I have three things for you. Brisbane is 10 of 14 in save opportunities. The Heat are 7 of 9. There's 106 walks for Brisbane this year as a staff, 83 for Perth. That's 20 plus walk difference. That's a pretty big set of bags, right? But there's one more stat that we probably haven't talked about. Now, granted, Brisbane's a smaller ballpark. The Heat have one thing they lead the league in that no one else has done more than maybe 3, which I believe the Heat have 5. Heat have 5 triples. Now you're going, well, what does that mean in a ballpark like that? Well, what that means in a ballpark like that is that Perth's 5 triples, well, those 5 triples at home are 5 more home runs. The Heat, Brisbane, triple wise.
Pretty much. And as I talked about earlier, I think virtually, like I can remember at least 3 of those triples all hitting the outfield fence. All one bounce off the outfield fence. So to my point earlier.
Yeah, in a series like this, a razor thin margin, and we break it all down. And I'm going to take the easy way out, but I still believe this is an even series. They split this series 2-2. And which for Perth, that's a series win because they have the tiebreaker. I'm going to take the Heat. I'm going to take the Heat splitting the series with Brisbane. Your thoughts? Your call?
Yeah, I think I just don't know how you go beyond a split. I mean, I'd love to go out but it would be a complete just guess to say something because I don't see where these two teams differ much at all.
Well, we're a little over time here. I'm going to table the TK stuff because I've got some really good stuff on him. But I want to just throw a couple things out there. Where I'm going at, because I had a whole segment, but I didn't get into it. But you and I both firmly believe that Tim Kennelly is the greatest of the Australian Baseball League. Just to close it out here before we go to because we also have news and notes. We'll get to those just real quick. But the TK thing, I've got a lot of stuff here. I'm going to save it because there's a couple things I don't think people remember that his numbers might be greater than they already are, which is crazy to think. But you're a guy that's called his games a number of times. You've gotten to know him. We both have. I think we consider him a mate of ours. But I think that as journalists, we can also take our journalism hat on and put it on and be journos. Just what makes him Tim Kennelly in your book, just without diving into numbers, just what
I think. I think last weekend is the exact part of it. As I say, I think that Thursday game was the worst game I've ever seen the Heat play. I really do. I don't recall a game that I've just gone, boy, that whole thing was completely wheels off. I mean, they had opportunities they had left multiple runners on back. They had multiple opportunities, cash in runs. Just didn't. It just all went pear-shaped off the back of Beardsley having such a good start. But then TK got a couple of knocks late, and then to go 10 for 10, and he took that team on the shoulders again. And like it was clear that effort on Thursday was not good enough, and that effort on Thursday was not going to get you to where you wanted to go. But to me, it was clear as day that he took it upon himself to kind of go, look, boys, this isn't us. This isn't who we want to be. This isn't what we're about. And he went and led by example again. He hit a triple, a couple of doubles, and just again went 8 for 8, then went 10 for 10, and then kind of and was just, and it wasn't only till this nightcap Saturday game. I think the first time he was out in a couple of days, but to me that was sort of a guy that kind of looked at a game and went. He had a bad error as well. Was it on the Thursday game? I think it was the windy conditions. Might have been on the Thursday game that scored a bunch of runs. It was a regulation catch in centre that he missed. And I talked to him after the game about it. He was real salty on himself about that. But what he's done and continue to do is he doesn't. If something goes wrong, he fixes it, and he fixes it by leading. And I think that's where in my opinion, I thought the weekend was a classic example in a game that went completely pear-shaped, where he himself had an unbelievably uncharacteristic error to turn around offensively, for them to win 3 games off the back of him then going on to win hitter of the round. I think says everything. And it's just a guy that just didn't accept, he's one of these guys that doesn't walk into the dugout, he doesn't throw his helmet, doesn't smash his bat, doesn't really ever lose his cool, but he just knew that wasn't good enough, that effort wasn't good enough, and I'm going to lead by example and show you guys the level we need to be playing at and what we need to be doing. And to me, that's why he'll be a Hall of Famer, in not only WA but in Australia. And to Tonks's point, he's tell me another sport in Australia tell me any other league in Australia where you would have your best player, and there probably is examples of this, but your best player would be out there signing autographs for kids left, right, and centre, having a chat to anyone, spending the time talking to it just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. A guy that has got the pedigree he's got to continually put in and help baseball is. I'm as I say, I'm a fan of the a fan of the TK group, and I'm happy to lead the charge. But to me, just all those things and more, DV.
I'm going to save the numbers that I was going to break down, but I'm going to pull something from the numbers from experience where this came from, because there was a stretch for the Heat's history here on Talking Baseball Australia. Dan Vaughn and Paul Morgan with you, by the way. They had a couple of lean years. There was one in particular where they had a transition where Matty Kennelly was the manager, and a lot of young kids. There was a young Jess Williams, a young Alex Hall making their debuts. Yeah. I think Luke was still playing. And TK was still playing. But the team, it was basically Luke and TK and a bunch of kids. They just saw come up to the ranks, some of which they'd seen in younger state league games, but didn't play together. I mean, these are young kids. And I remember I think I told this story about going to Melbourne, and George Brett's there, and those kids didn't know who George Brett was and all that. Well, I remember vividly, the team was not real good that year. They finished, I believe, the bottom of the ladder. And they fought their tails off. They were fun, and I called every game all the way. And I remember vividly being in Brisbane. And when Josh Kelly was the EO, and Josh had a home run on a Sunday there. And his brother TK was as excited for his brother as he ever for anybody else there. I mean, it was like, it's not about him, it's about the team. And to watch him after the game, taking photos with him. And then also, as you saw, and I saw this time and time again, here was a team that wasn't very good. They were not very good that year. And it was probably the most fun year broadcasting was that year. This includes winning 3 rings in the American Association, but watching TK go about his business, and Luke Hughes signing autographs in Canberra and Melbourne, and visiting with fans after the ball game in Perth, always took the time, whether it be Claxton Shield champions or bottom of the ladder. It doesn't matter. And that's the kind of example set. And I guarantee you, there's a lot of young kids, and you now look at Alex Hall. I guarantee Alex Hall can say, how much TK's meant to him. I guarantee it's a lot, because Alex Hall's been in the big leagues, right? I mean, this young man's has made a career, and that can only be a positive. So I just throw those memories out. I'll get those numbers down the road.
For my last thought, I must say, on the weekend, DV, I was thinking about that year, because to me as well, that was my favorite year, even though the team was no good. But I thought there was such a nice tie-in moment in this series. Of course, we started the series, Tim Kennelly celebrating game number 400. Before the series ended, we celebrated Alex Hall playing game number 200. I immediately thought about that skinny kid who was the catcher that had to come in. I mean, and I've talked about this on the broadcast. Had to come in taking over the great Alan D. San Miguel, and look at him now. When probably you break down the numbers, it's probably
D-Sam was catching in Melbourne, and with the first road trip, Alex was the catcher across the way, and that was that same George Brett trip. I think that was that same one. I remember that. Vivid. Boy, how time flies. Talking Baseball Australia Live, baseball's best mate. Couple of news and notes. There was a really good thing. I retweeted it on our Twitter and also on yours. I believe on mine was the piece that GB and Sydney did on Travis Mazzana, who probably going to be a top round pick. Great conversation that really kind of pulled the curtain back on what his situation is. A fine young man. I did see as well that Nick Ward was picked up by the Braves. And I did see one more. Here was two more somewhere. Briley Knight from Adelaide.
Briley Knight went to the Washington Wild Things.
And I'm missing one more.
Quite a few outfielders now. The Washington Wild Things are starting to really get some ABL signings.
Yeah, they really are. And it's a good connection there between the independent leagues, et cetera. But we've gone over time, imagine that. But a lot of things we didn't get to here on Talking Baseball Australia Live. But your final thoughts for we shut it down for another round
I think this is a really interesting round because it's a round that I think, the Giants can basically, sew up the top two spot. I think the Heat in Brisbane can, they can show us, and delicious, because the fact is, I think probably the Heat in Brisbane will finish 2 and 3. Who finishes second, who finishes third, I don't know, but I think they'll finish 2. So I think these guys get the opportunity to have a look at themselves before they probably have to have another bout in a couple of weeks' time. And so that's a huge series. And as for Tom said that next following week will be huge. The Claxton Shield Club out at the Aces v the Heat series, which is always good to see the boys up there as well.
Tonks, we got to do something, Tonks, for next year. I don't know, it's too late this year, but next year we got to get Mongo back over there. Steve Montgomery, he's got to make a trip. Maybe next year me and Mongo will come together at the same time. He'd love to see you guys, by the way. But Steve Montgomery is the manager of the Sioux City Explorers, who, by the way, son, this is an interesting tidbit, former Heater who won the Claxton Shield back in '96, right, Tonks? Am I right? His son's playing at Oregon State, who is a teammate of
Briley Knight.
Well, and the young man we we're just talking about.
Oh, Travis Mazzana.
Yeah, they're teammates at Oregon State. How about that? Yeah. He'll never leave. Yeah, if we bring Mongo back, he might never go back. That guy, he's a great guy. Steve Montgomery's a really good dear mate of mine. He's been really good to the Heat over the years and helping get, just be a real big supporter of me and what we're doing here. But he's a friend of Tonks. We're teammates together, but he's the manager in Sioux City. But anyway, it's funny how that works because former Claxton Shield winner, and we're connecting the Australian dots together. So anyway, as we wrap it up here, big weekend, and
it's a big weekend. I'm looking forward to it tonight. It starts, and and we look forward to next week. We'll look forward to next week.
All right, mate. I'll let you go, and I'll sign us off here. There he goes, Paul Morgan, baseball's best mate there from Perth, and let him go there, and we'll close things out here on the show. But I had a lot of things to get to. What's so fun about what Paul and I do is we're thousands of miles apart, but we're still kind of connected. And so we get going, and we're a broadcast crew. And so, I would tell you, in this business, as a broadcast partnership, maybe 15, 20% of the things you go over in your head before the broadcast you use. A lot of stuff just sits on the table and you bring it up later on. And we've had a couple of shows where we didn't need a lot. We didn't bring up things, but suddenly a door opens and we go into the hallway, and it's like that sometimes. And so we were a little over-prepared today because I was a little unprepared last week, but it worked out. And anyway, I have a lot of TK stuff I want to get to. We'll maybe push it back. And Maybe we'll get him on the end of the show, the off season, something like that. There's a lot of really good numbers that I want to get to that I don't think people really realize. I want the history of his story to be out there, that it's a really unique history that a lot of people don't remember a couple of turns in the history of the one and only Tim Kennelly. But a big weekend of baseball starting tonight. And, of course, you can catch us right here every week, same time, same place. I'll put that graphic. Don't knock the computer over there. Let's put the graphic up for you guys right there. Here we go. 9 a.m. Well, is that right? Yeah, 9. Yeah, actually, this is the wrong one. Oh, my bad. Sorry about that. It's our 12th season. We changed the time. We're with time change, and I didn't even put the new one up there. Oh, well. The time change is actually not correct. I'll put that up there right. So anyway, same time, same place at 8 a.m. in Perth. Adjust your watch accordingly. 6 p.m. in North America Central Daylight Time. Big thanks to Paul Morgan for you folks that stopped by. Again, you can always catch us right here on our Facebook page, Talking Baseball Australia. And, of course, our podcast will be up. If you're listening to the podcast now, it's up. If you're watching us right now, it's coming. I don't know. It's coming up. Podcast always follows the live show. We'll be up there in just a few minutes. But glad you guys stopped along on the video side or on the audio side. The reason I believe the ABL fans are the best because you guys are. You guys are passionate and you care. It's 2024. Let's be better fans tomorrow than we were today. Let's show more love tomorrow than we did today. It's a cruel world out there. A lot of really crappy stuff going on. But you know what? We can still tip our cap to each other. Have a good day with each other. Have a good chat, a good cold one together, and a tip of the cap, and show some love going forward. Lots of love in 2024. For Paul Morgan, I'm Dan Vaughn. Hope your team wins. We'll see you next week on Talking Baseball Australia Live. Baseball's best mate. Roll the close.